New video into Fox News of 5 more buses carrying migrants from Texas arriving in New York City earlier this morning. And we're learning more about where many are staying at taxpayer expense. The city is renting some 5,000 rooms at a swanky hotel just 1 block from Times Square with spectacular views of the iconic skyline. Rooms cost up to $700 per night. Oh, there's also a top-of-the-line fitness center on the 3rd floor. Officials are keeping the cost of all of this under wraps, but a similar package to house the homeless during the early days of the pandemic came at a $300 million tab. One of the things we never hear about is how dangerous of a journey this is. And there are a lot of people that we die. Some people we won't even know about because their bodies get lost in the Rio Grande or they're found days later.
That's right. A 2-month-old currently fighting for his life in that drowning episode Dagan mentioned in the Rio Grande. A 5-year-old girl was swept out of her mother's arms as she tried to cross the river. A 3-year-old boy likewise lost his life. This was all yesterday. And the New York Post, their headline says it all, their editorial board, deaths of migrant children expose Biden's cruelty. Because the truth is, the luxury hotels we just showed in New York, that is not the end result for most illegal immigrants. For many, unfortunately, they reach death trying to get here. The numbers tell it all. 2019, 300 perished. 2020, 247. 2021, 566. You see it going up. And this year, we're only in August. Up through July, 609 migrants died trying to cross our southern border. And that doesn't count those who made the dangerous journey before. It is not compassionate to incentivize this.
No.
Hello and welcome to ThisWay's Network, the chat session. I'm Rodney Allen Rippey, and I got my incredible host and co-host with me today, and we're having a great time. And today's topic is, when does being nice become unloving? So what's happening, Jefferson? How's everything going, man?
Hey, Rodney, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, as we see in that clip and in so many other news stories that's hitting our news feeds, and for me, my dinner table conversation as of late, there's constantly this kind of push and pull of, well, shouldn't we be providing this for these people? Shouldn't we be allowing this for these people? Shouldn't we? Everything from college debt cancellation to homeless to immigration, yada, yada. Shouldn't we be nice and doing these things for people? And yet then there's also the push and pull of, well, if we do everything for everybody, that's not loving, that's just enabling and then causing more troubles down the line. Am I right, Nina?
Yeah, I completely agree, because what we end up doing is robbing them of something far greater than what we end up giving them.
Wow. You know, it seems as though that there's got to be some serious discussion on both sides, you know, on the right and on the left, that there has to be some type of happy medium drawn, because what is now starting to happen, it's creating a huge divide in America. I mean, people are looking at this and some people are saying, well, how do we fix this problem? Should we be focused more on home? We have our own issues here. Should we lock off the border? But really, some people are saying, should this become an issue at these different governments and say, hey, listen, you need to take care of your problems at home and stop all of the things that are, you know, that are really hampering. It's sad, you know, people down in Mexico, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of hardworking people down there, but yet there's also a lot of bad people down there taking advantage of the good people. And so those people are saying, I got to get out of here. And that's creating, you know, issues across the board. So what do you guys think about that?
Well, you know, I remember, and when I was a boy, you know, forever ago, it seemed to be just what we called common sense. I don't think there's such thing as common sense anymore, because there doesn't seem to be any commonality, but that's a discussion for another day. But I think that what has happened is, what used to be common is we would kind of, if not agree, at least agree on terms, agree on the vocabulary that we're using, or maybe even what is the exact problem that we're trying to solve. When I look at things like, just take, for instance, that story that we led off with, or with the immigration problem, I always think of a guy that I knew back when I was waiting tables who was a functioning alcoholic. And every morning we'd show up to work at this restaurant together, and he's just pounding Tylenol and has all these like crazy drinks that he's mixing together. And I'm like, look, your problem is not the hangover. Your problem is that you're getting drunk every night. And so as we look at, what do we do with this immigration problem? What do we do with this flood of immigrants that are coming over? Do we put them up in luxury hotels? Do we find them jobs? Do we bus them to these other cities? How about we solve the alcoholism problem? How about we, metaphorically, how about we solve the actual problem that's, there's no gateway, literally no gateway anymore, stopping anybody and everybody to come through across the border illegally.
Well, I mean, we're looking more or less about security issues, because some people are legitimately trying to get away from things, and they're just wanting a better life. But then at the other hand, who's to say where does the line get drawn? Because it creates also an open door for us and a way for, bad people to come through and really start doing some major damage here. And so, again, these are some very hard issues that our government is facing. And I don't think there's any one quick fix. This has got to be something that has to get talked across the board. And people have to legitimately say, okay, how did this problem get started and how do we fix it?
And then fix it.
Yeah, and then fix it.
Yes, I mean, that's part of the big problem, right, Nina? I mean, it's we could talk all day long for years and years and years, and nothing gets fixed. But I'm sorry, Nina, I interrupted. Go ahead.
No, I completely agree with you. This has actually been a problem that's been in the works for decades, literally. And all it's done is gotten worse and worse and worse. Apparently, I don't understand why we haven't gotten a clue that what we're doing is not only not working, it's actually making the problem worse.
It's amazing.
The same, I think the same can be said not just about our immigration problem. We could easily fill the whole half hour just on this single topic. But like, as I mentioned earlier, something we've been talking a lot about around our dinner table is the student loan forgiveness program that Biden suggested. It's very similar in the that there's a problem. It's a big problem. It affects millions of people on our land here in the United States. And so how do you fix it? Do you fix it at the alcoholism problem, or do you fix it at the hangover problem? I mean, which problem are we going to solve?
Oh, I love the way you said that.
I think that also, too, you're looking at how do we give our economy a lift? I mean, there's a lot of people who are out here struggling. I mean, this pandemic has really hammered small businesses. It has hurt a lot of people. And so, can this be something that we could have, to assist people, to actually give people a break? Some people say, well, I had to put my kids through school. That's unfair to me. What are you going to do for me? But at the same time, if we go back in history and start righting all the wrongs, the nation would be bankrupt. I mean, literally would be bankrupt. But we are trying to find sensible solutions to being able to make things better, make our nation better, and also kind of straighten out some of the things that have been overlooked.
But, I don't think the solution is that we are supposed to relieve everyone of whatever struggles they have. And not even maybe a few people. It's one thing to provide relief in a disaster, which definitely everyone needs help then. But when there's a problem that's been developing for a long time, maybe even over a lifetime, because of choices that we make, then when are we going to reach the pain point that motivates us to make a change in what we're choosing?
And that's what we're talking about, some very distinct things there. If we're looking at the pandemic, I prefer there's other, more educated people than me that I enjoy how they say it's not COVID and it's not the pandemic that affected our businesses or our way of life. It was the government's reaction to it. it was the government saying you must shut down your business. You cannot go out and eat at restaurants. You cannot do all these different things. That then these businesses were crippled because, as you know, a guy who I listen to a lot, he put it perfectly. It was like the government driving an F-150 right through your living room. Well, now the government driving that F-150 owes you, you know, compensation for that. But that's totally different, as you were saying, Nina, the two problems that have been building and persisting and known for decades because of lifestyles of, I keep coming back to the student loan thing, but there's so many others of, you know, I'm taking out this loan, colleges are raising their fees, yada, yada, yada. I mean, homeless people are making their decisions to, there's a laundry list of things that are ending people on the streets. And at some point, I'll just own it. I sound like a jerk because I'm not being overly nice and giving to these people with my government dollars. You know, that's where I think when we look at today's topic, it's so hard because it's like, why am I the jerk?
Well, you know, it isn't really so much about being the jerk. And when you start talking about when is being nice, you know, being unloving, I think that, you know, there's got to be a happy medium here, because when I see just even in that, you know, people can't handle truth. You know, if you drop a little truth on somebody, or if you say, hey, listen, I love you and I'm being nice, but I've got to tell you, this is not really working for you, or this isn't good for, you know, and then it's not good for me. It's not good for you. And I think that there has to be a loving way that we address all things. I mean, people are speaking out of emotion. People are speaking out of lies, fears, you know, a whole bunch of stuff that's being put out there. And people, you know, and it's really starting to get to the point where, you know, I was just watching the news the other night, and there were two generals talking and saying, America is getting into the point where we're looking like a parliament. I mean, over at, you know, in the government, you see these people when they don't like each other and they're across, they start battling literally right there in the Capitol. Are we going to take it that far? Or can America be better? Can we, I mean, whether you're Democrat or Republican, we got to get together and do this for the benefit of the American people, for our nation, for jobs, education, employment, healthcare, you know, mental health care. I mean, all of this, gun control, all this stuff has to be discussed.
Now, we've got some of our comments I find very interesting here. One person says, Rachel says, there's a difference between being nice and kind and loving.
Oh, see, I thought you were going to pick up the comments that say, Nina, you're right on. Nina, that's so true. Nina, you look beautiful this morning.
Well, however true that all may be.
There's none of those heading mine and Rodney's way.
Hey.
Or as my mother used to say, when someone gave her a compliment, she'd say, you're just saying that because it's true.
Gracious.
Which, yeah, I loved it. She had us all laughing all the time.
But yeah, anyway, you're right. But go ahead. The difference. Yeah.
Well, and Bonnie is pointing out, she said, God was not being nice when he told us all have sinned and come short of the glory of God.
That's right.
So there is sometimes people equate being nice with being loving. And they think if you're not being nice to me, you're not being loving. But love oftentimes has to tell you the hard things, has to do the hard things, has to withdraw the support, the help, so that you can find out that you can stand on your own.
Yeah, but also a lot of people struggle because there are things in place that hamper that. I mean, and we got to get to the point where we truly are loving each other. I mean, really, with a God-centered type of love, regardless of your race, regardless how you look, regardless what neighborhood you came from. That's the type of agape, type of God love that we need to really put out there and stop with all the talk. Because when you love your neighbor, if you see something that's not right, you'll step up and say, hey, let me help my brother. And it doesn't have to mean brother by the color of your skin. I mean, we all are brothers and sisters, and we should, Lord, help us to be brothers and sisters in Christ, or something that is going to stop people from at least being harmful and damaging to one another.
Well, you know, that brings up a really good point too, Rodney, in that the aid for, we'll say the aid for the homeless, the betterment of our education system, or, you know, whatever the problem may be that we're trying to address, is it better taken care of, as I think you described, by individuals, by each and every one of us helping our neighbors, helping our brothers, helping our community?
In
Or
addition
is
to,
it better done, is it better done from the government and then for these different programs?
in addition to, brother, the government can't do everything. And I mean, and we actually there are more nice people in this world than there are bad people. And I really believe that there are more loving and caring people, and we need to activate. We need to actually get out there and start saying, you know what, hey man, we can fix these things. We don't have to just sit back and fold our arms and wait for the government to do everything. There's a lot that we could do in our communities, in our own homes, with our own families. And it starts at home. I really believe that.
What I find alarming is anything we depend on the government for, the government can use as a tool to manipulate us into doing what they want us to do. And the threat of taking it away leaves you vulnerable to saying, okay, I'll acquiesce and do what you want, whether it's taking a chip in your hand or accepting medical treatment maybe you didn't want.
Well, I mean, these are things too that we have to start looking at. Do we I mean, I'm getting to the point where I'm like, I hear so many people talk. I'm like, do we trust the government or do we not? Because now it's getting to the point that this thing has to get fixed. People are starting to question the very things that our government stand on. I mean, like votes. I mean, they're going to say, well, you know, were the votes accurate? And then some people say, no, this election was completely stolen. And we're like, well, who do you believe? If you get to the point, or if we allow ourselves to get to the point that we don't even trust our government, we got some serious problems. I mean, I think serious problems.
That ship has sailed, man. That you go way back to the 2000 election between Bush and Gore. I mean, once it went to the Supreme Court and then it was decided for Bush, you had 50% of the nation saying Bush was not legally or accurately elected. And that's when, you know, to my recollection, that's when the whole "not my president" thing actually began. That's not a new or novel thing. It's just something that has built and built and built over time.
So when our government is behaving in a way that is not trustworthy and refuses transparency, why should we trust them? I mean, I want to be able to trust our government, but when they, like I said, when they behave in a manner that is not trustworthy, they make it very difficult.
Mic drop.
Yeah, no, mic drop.
I agree. I remember doing a video project for a church a number of years ago, and it was their senior pastor's like 30th anniversary of being there, and so I went to a lot of the long-term church members and staff members, and I said, you know, what is it that really excites you about listening to this pastor's teachings? What is it that excites you about, you know, sitting under this guy's leadership? And time again, I kept hearing things like, well, he's my pastor, so therefore by that title, I then follow. And I've known a lot of pastors. My parents and my in-laws have been involved in high-level ministry my whole life. And so I've seen a lot of guys, or I should say, I've seen a lot of pastors, in my mind, just become guys because they failed or because they had their own weaknesses or whatever. And it really struck me that the title pastor, and I began to be a little cynical, if you will. And I remember with this one gal looking at me going, you know, it's really sad that you've gotten to the point that you're so cynical about pastors. You should be able to put your faith in these men because they're God-ordained leaders. Well, flash forward these decades later, and here we are again with our governmental leaders. I know there's a lot of good, solid Christian people who are like, these are our divinely ordained leaders. We should put our trust and our obedience in them. And I'm with Nina. I'm like, you know what though? If they're not acting honorable, it's hard for me to honor them. If they're not acting responsible, it's hard for me to give them responsibility for me and my family's lives.
I can honor the office.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can honor the office and have respect for the office, but when the person in the office abuses the office
Mm-hmm.
in a way that does harm,
Well, I mean,
no, I can't put my trust in that person.
We've got some serious issues beyond just politics. I mean, we got people who don't even believe that, you know, that Christ and God and the Godhead, that this is even real. And I mean, and if you don't even believe that there is a God out there and somewhere, something bigger than us, you know, a lot of times you can't even trust common man. You can't even trust your own brother. You certainly ain't gonna trust you know, support any type of politics, because everybody is running on what they believe and what they think. But you know, when do we get things back to real, true, you know, center type of real principles? Because, you know, now the problem in America, people are calling things that were right wrong and wrong right. That's some serious stuff. And things are starting to become shades of gray. It used to be that things were like a little bit cut and dry and say, hey, this is the way it is. And everything was working just fine. But now that things are starting to become shades of gray, we got some serious issues about that. I mean, and that's causing some serious fallout, even on the political side, in homes, education. I mean, it's weird. You know, you hear people talking about, you know, critical race theory, and they're talking about things. But I'm like, wait a minute. I'm at 54 years old. I'm still discovering things that I had no clue about. And I'm like, well, why didn't they teach this in school? And a lot of people are saying, well, you know, it was intentional, Rodney. And I'm like, wow. And I think more brown and black kids out there would have a much higher self-esteem if they only knew the truth of what actually happened. Actually, a colleague sent me a book, and it was called, gosh, what is the name of the book? Hold on, I'm sorry, I have to grab it. It literally just came in the mail. Pride and the Journey, 5,000 years of African American history, and I mean, leaders, inventors, and stuff. And I was like, I'm thumbing through this book. I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. And I was like, so there's just got to be some serious information that gets out here. And I think that it's great shows like this where people are talking and people are starting to open their minds up and starting to see real truth and real discussion. Nina,
Well,
what do you think?
I think you nailed on something. You hit something on the head there of living a life where we are not relying on the government, or we're not relying on our own misunderstandings, but we're relying on God to provide the solutions for our problems. And as people of faith, I think that's something that I know that I try to arm my kids with is the hope and the joy and the knowledge that God is going to be a provider, even in the most dire of situations. You know, I know time is kind of running short. Nina and I had a chance to have a little bit of a conversation earlier this week. And I mean, any infant or any example that I could come up with of that pales in comparison with Nina's story. So we definitely wanted to allow that, Nina. So as we look at these situations where the government or even us brothers and sisters and community members could help facilitate solutions for people's problems, I think that you lived out that in your own life, right?
I did. Actually, I have many, many times, because God has shown himself faithful for a long time in my life. But when I first began to see these things for myself was when my third son had been born with a genetic liver disease and needed a transplant to survive, and didn't get that transplant and did not survive. And obviously before that, I had been praying every prayer I knew, giving God every reason I could think of why he should let my son live. And yet my son didn't live. But God, during that time, in his wisdom, made it evident to me that he knew what he was doing and that I could trust him.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time all was said and done, all I could say to myself was, I have a child secure in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want for my other kids. I wouldn't ask him to come back now if I could. Look at what he's already seen, what he's already experienced, that I long for, that I can
Mm-hmm.
only dream about.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I feel like, and I even asked God at one point, you know, if I could take this suffering away from him, let me take it. You know, I'll do it myself. And God was saying to me, why would you rob him of the blessings that come along with that suffering? There is fellowship with God in suffering. Now, I'm not trying to promote it as something that, oh, yes, we should all be praying we're all going to suffer. But what I am saying is when we all look to relieve ourselves of the what goes along with the suffering, we miss out on that fellowship with God and knowing God in a way that we never would have known him before, and having that confidence toward him that nothing can replace.
Yeah. So I think when we're looking at everything that's going on in the world, I think, it's funny, when things are going good and money's flowing and you're healthy, a lot of people don't really even think too much about serving God. when when money's just flying and everything's just rolling right along, people they forget to tithe, they forget to sacrifice and think about these things. And I think that through struggle, sometimes it keeps us close to the Lord because, and it's a reminder that we're not doing this on our own, that we have, a greater, our Father that's in heaven, that's actually interceding for us and doing great things for us. And sometimes we have to accept things as they are. But when you're looking at things like with government, we could do better. I mean, our communications with one another, our love for our communities and things and ourselves. Oh, we're in control of that. We can handle that, and we should be handling it. And I think that the discussions that are happening in the news, we're going to have a lot more to talk about as things roll on.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I'm a huge sports fan, and I started watching this documentary just this last week where a team in England was faltering, and this new ownership comes in and has to start fresh, and they hate it. It was hard. They realize these are real people's lives that we are devastating by having to fire them and start new. When it comes to our government, if we don't see solutions, if we don't see betterment, it's time for us as the owners to clean house and get new management in there and clean up that roster.
Well, we're
Right.
1 minute out. I just want to say, Nina, 10 seconds. What's our 10 seconds? What can you do for today? What a positive word.
A positive word for today.
Yep.
We can all be of good courage because God is with us and we are not alone.
There it is. Well, everybody, we hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure you come back next Thursday, 8:30, same time, Pacific time. And again, this has been the chat session on ThisWay Network.